Alright, I was never planning on watching this movie, but I was at my dad's place this past weekend and he wanted to watch it. So we ended up watching it on HBO Max, so I didn't see this in theaters. So here we go. Those Who Wish Me Dead. So Those Who Wish Me Dead is based off a book that I've never read or even heard of before this movie. The main character is Angelina Jolie. She plays the smokejumper, which is a person who jumps down from a chopper and fights forest fires. Something that, myself being an Angelino, I see all too often. But anyway, she meets up with this traumatized kid. This kid is on the run from a couple of bad guys who are after him because he knows something. Oh, and also there's a sheriff played by Jon Bernthal, and he gets involved with this whole thing too. And so that's this movie. And this movie, I didn't hate it completely, which that's always a great way to start a review, isn't it? That's never a good sign when a review starts with, I didn't completely hate it, but I didn't completely hate it. Is it a forgettable movie? Yeah. Seriously, I am pretty sure by the end of this year, I'm gonna look back on this movie and be like, oh yeah, I did watch that movie. Because like I said, I wasn't even planning on watching it in the first place. I will, however, give this movie credit for a couple of things though. First and foremost, the bad guys. The villains, they're the best part of this movie. They're played by Nicholas Hoult and Littlefinger from Game of Thrones. And not only was their acting good, but I swear, these villains have to be like among the smartest bad guys I think I've ever seen in a movie. I really mean that. They're a couple of hitmen, and they just know the smartest thing to do in whatever situation they're in. They make all the right calls. Example, they have the sheriff played by Jon Bernthal. They have him at hands up, and they tell him to drop his weapon and lay face down on the ground. And they strip him of his weapons, and they even ask where his backup weapon is. He's like, yeah, it's in my right ankle. I was like, if I were a goon, I wouldn't have thought of that. That is one smart villain. And situations like that keep happening throughout the movie where I was like, these villains are just super smart. They know what they're doing, and they're not gonna fuck their mission up. I would almost be rooting for them if they weren't complete assholes. But really, honestly speaking though, that was the only good thing about the movie. I mean, still talking about the bad guys, we know that they're chasing after our protagonists, Angelina Jolie and this kid, but I swear to God, this movie never tells us why. This movie never tells us their goal, their end game. You get the feeling at one point that they're working for Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry is in this movie for all of like 1 2-minute scene. And even after that scene is over, you're like, I don't get any of that. That was some vague-ass dialogue, and I still have no idea what the bad guys are all about. Which is fine if this movie wants to give a little bit of intrigue and mystery to the bad guys, yeah, sure. But normally there would be a payoff at the end of the movie where we find out what their plan is, and their motives, But no, by the end of this movie, by the time the credits roll, you still know nothing about the bad guy's cause. All you know is that they want to kill this kid because he has some information. But like, why is it so important to the bad guys that this information never gets out? You never find out. And that's not the only bad thing about this movie. I found several flaws. I didn't feel a lot of chemistry between the characters in this movie. Like Angelina Jolie and the kid, their chemistry is okay, but really it was Jon Bernthal and his wife. In this movie, you're supposed to care about their relationship, but I personally just felt no chemistry between these two actors. I mean, the wife is actually a pretty cool character. She does actually have a couple of badass scenes. I just didn't feel the chemistry between her and Jon Bernthal. That's just my personal opinion. Also, this movie took forever to finally get going. I noticed that the main plot of the movie didn't even start until about 40 minutes in. Because the official synopsis says that, Angelina Jolie finds this traumatized kid and they team up and run from the bad guys. The kid doesn't even become traumatized until like 35 minutes into the movie. Now, I'm all for a good slow build-up if the movie, wants to take its time to tell its story, but usually that means the movie should be like 2.5 hours long or something, or at least 2 hours, or 2 hours and 15 or something. This movie is 1 hour and 40 minutes long. So by the time it gets to the actual plot, I was like, okay, we have 1 hour left of this movie. Let's get going with the story. I'll also say that this movie felt kind of disjointed. By that, I mean, I didn't feel like Angelina Jolie's character was the most important character in the movie, even though she was the main character, because it didn't feel like she was in enough scenes to justify her being the main character. This movie goes like back and forth between her and the kid and Jon Bernthal and the bad guys, but you would think that the main character would have the most screen time in the movie, right? And maybe she does in this movie. I didn't clock it or anything, but it just didn't feel like she did. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. If a movie wants to focus on different characters, that's fine. I just felt like this movie was supposed to focus more on Angelina Jolie's character, and it just didn't. I don't know, I could be totally crazy right now, but that's how I felt. The intense scenes in this movie were pretty intense though. I'll give this movie that for sure. I mean, not just with the bad guys, but with the big forest fires. There's a point where Angelina Jolie and the kid are running from this big forest fire that's going on all around them, and this fire was really moving too. These things spread like crazy. I guess that's where the phrase spread like wildfire comes from. I've never been up close and personal with one, but I'll take people's word for it. So the movie does start to feel a little bit unrealistic when Angelina Jolie and this kid are running from the fire, and the fire's not just swallowing them up and engulfing them in flames because it's faster than them. I feel like that's what would happen realistically. But hey, for the sake of the movie, our main characters have to make it through the situation. But as unrealistic as it felt, it did feel intense. So props to this movie for that. As for the score in this movie, I mean, really? Do you really want to hear me talk about the score for Those Who Wish Me Dead? Not that it was a bad score or anything, but, you know, it's this movie. The score was composed by Brian Tyler, good composer, and I'll actually say that the music in this movie was good, it was functional. I'm not gonna get the soundtrack, of course, but, you know, it actually really worked in the movie. In fact, at points, it helped to boost up the intensity, so can't knock it for that. So in conclusion, Those Who Wish Me Dead, it was on the right track, but I just felt like it had 100 missteps. The story was really interesting, it just wasn't told in the best way. The pacing was pretty slow, I hardly felt the chemistry between the main characters, and at times it felt like the movie didn't know who to focus on mainly. But the villains were great. Again, they were like the best thing about the movie, and the intense scenes were pretty intense, and at points it was thanks to those bad guys. So I won't tell you to avoid this movie at all costs. If you're interested, yeah, you should watch it. Not in theaters though. So given that, for Those Who Wish Me Dead, I will say, wait until you can stream this movie online. By that I mean if you want to watch it with your HBO Max subscription at no extra cost, go for it. That's my advice. So, Those Who Wish Me Dead. Have you seen it? What do you think about it? Or have you read the book? What do you think about it? Or what is your favorite Angelina Jolie movie? That's a good question. Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe.